At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
August 24th, 2016, the I Am 911 movement is born. One of my personal stories set the tone for this movement. What started out as a way to raise awareness for the reclassification issue for dispatchers quickly turned into peer support. 911 professionals from all over the world were sharing their stories. On Facebook alone, at that time, the engagements were over 34 million. It spawned a peer support session at conferences called Imagine Listening, where dispatchers shared their stories out loud or on paper. For years, I have been asked if this would ever become a book, coming June 2023, and available now for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. From Titletown Publishing, Imagine Listening, Your Worst Day is Our Everyday. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and we are about to get started with Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to patrons and Facebook subscribers, basically subscribers of the podcast, whether it be on Patreon or Facebook. Thank you so much for everything. I wouldn't be able to do this without all of you, but especially all of you who are watching, listening, supporting, sharing everything. Man, by the time this one posts, it'll be probably after the National NENA Conference. And so I'll just go ahead and say right now, at the National NENA Conference, I am going to be putting out some classes that I'm going to be doing. Within the Trenches Media is going to be offering some training, which are basically the sessions that I've done at different conferences. However, I'm going to be breaking them up into 4 hours and 8 hours and really doing a deep dive into a lot of the different topics that I go over, whether it be mental health and wellness, recruiting through storytelling, what it's like in the beginning, that struggle, but also the triumph through that struggle, which is basically bridging the gap between veteran dispatchers and those that are just starting out, because, a lot of times we forget what it was like in the beginning, and we need to stop eating our young. And that's one of the things that we talk about. But also Imagine Listening. We do Imagine Listening and in some of the other sessions and stuff. So I'm excited to be able to offer that to all of you. So if you're looking for any training like that, please get a hold of me. There's many different ways, but in the bottom left-hand corner, if you're watching this, you can do so by looking up links.co. That's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. And you'll find all of my information there, how to get a hold of me, all of that good stuff. And there's more that's coming. The book launched at the conference, and it's funny because I'm talking about something that hasn't fully happened yet. So I'm trying to speculate, I guess. I hope it goes well. But I've had books there, and I'm going to have books to be able to sell and sign. I'm going to try to do the same thing in Nashville for the APCO conference. And then one thing really quick, these past 2 weeks have been really rough for myself and my family. My aunt, my mom's eldest sister, is has been really sick, and there was some scares these past couple of weeks, and we're still going through it. As of right now, as of June 12th, 2023, we're still going through this. I came back to do the rest of the stuff that I was doing. My aunt is in Michigan, and my mom is there as well. And then during that time, one of my best friends growing up passed away as well. So there's been a lot of stuff going on top of everything that I'm doing with the podcast, with the launch of the Imagine Listening book, and it's been rough. But thank you to all of you who have reached out. I appreciate you more than you know. You know, some that I thought would reach out and never did, which is crazy. But I guess that's life, and we just continue going. But thank you all. I appreciate you more than you know, and things are going to continue to build. Old alliances and friendships are broken and gone, and new alliances are coming. So get ready, because I know I am, as well as new friendships, which I'm super happy about. So, all of that out of the way, we are back at it in fuck it mode, and we're going to be doing this. Choose your hard, man. That's how we're doing this. And I choose to proceed and wave to those on the way. So I am excited, super excited. I have definitely needed this person here today with me, my guest today, because she is just fucking amazing. And you're about to hear from her here in just a moment. We spent a lot of time getting to know each other, actually, and talking a lot a few months ago, and continued ever since then. And my guest today is Hannah, and she is a dispatcher on demand and policy writer with Motivations. Yo, yo.
Hi.
Hello. Seriously, I needed you today.
I'm glad I could be here.
Yes, me too. Because we got to know each other a lot better as well at the Mayan Ranch that the 360-degree dispatcher puts on. That's run by Joe Serio and his right hand Karen. Both of them amazing people and
Yes,
stuff. And
absolutely.
you had the chance to go out there on a scholarship, right? Through
Yeah,
911
yeah,
Wonder Women
so
Inc.
the fireworks scholarship from the 911 Wonder Woman Foundation. So
Yes.
it opens up every year. They do the ranch a couple times a year. They do your ENP test. They do RPLs, a whole lot of different things. So if you're looking to put yourself out there, it's a great way to go.
Yes, for sure. And the day that you arrived, I had arrived there in Texas like a few hours before you, and I was sitting at this diner that had the most amazing crispy bacon.
Oh,
It was so good. And then I went and got you, and we went to the ranch and everything and got all things set up and stuff. And just the whole week was super good. And then at the end, you and I took a trip before going to the airport to
so
Bucky's.
Bucky.
Yes, to Bucky's.
So I feel like it's also important to like touch on why we spent so much time together at the ranch because I'm not old enough to rent a rental car. So
Oh,
Ricardo got
that's
to be
right.
my chauffeur for the whole week because I couldn't
That's
get around like anywhere by myself. The
right.
ranch is kind of walkable, but to the airport and stuff, no, I had to have somebody drive me. So
Oh,
Ricardo
right.
graciously volunteered to be my chauffeur for Sarah.
Yeah, and I am so glad that I had that opportunity because again, like I said, we got a chance to talk, we got a chance to know each other, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And again, going to Bucky's. Now, I've been there a few times. That was your first time there. So for those who are listening who have before we get into everything, for those who are listening who have never been to Bucky's, please enlighten these folks.
Okay, so you have to go at least once. At least once.
Yes.
I took my husband when we were in Florida for Florida APCO. a couple months ago, and that was his first time going to one. And it's basically like Walmart meets Sheetz gas station. If you know what a Sheetz is, that's the best way I know to describe it. So they have like food and stuff, but then they also have stuffed animals, but then they also have t-shirts, but then they also have like house decor. It's kind of like the little shop in Cracker Barrel. It's a lot, honestly, and it's massive. And the one we went to in Texas, I don't remember which city it was in Texas,
Yeah.
but it was packed. Absolutely, just people everywhere. And Ricardo was getting gas, and I went inside and promptly came right back out. And I was like, no, I'm not going in there by myself. Absolutely not. Too many people. No, thank you. I'm good. And he had actually gone inside to try to find me, and we
That's
walked
true.
right past each other, and it was so crowded, we missed each other completely.
For sure. Yeah. I went in there and I didn't see you right away. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go use the restroom. And then when I came out, I called you and you're like, I'm standing by this thing. We were literally like, all I had to do was turn and I saw her. but yeah, there was so many people in there. We couldn't see
Yeah.
each other. And for me, when I was describing it, I don't remember who I was describing it to, but for me, it was like being at an amusement park, but within a building.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, actually.
The amount of people walking by and stuff and just all the different voices. I mean, it was just sensory overload. But
Yep.
then I start going into dispatch mode and all I could think was, damn, anybody could just be taken out of here and no one would ever know because that's how many
Exactly.
people. Right. So then
This is
I'm
not a safe place for your kid.
right. So when you and I were walking, I think we talked about this a little bit when we were walking around getting stuff, whether it was food or drinks or whatever. I was like watching people and thinking, okay, oh no, that person has a parent with them, or oh, okay, they look like they're old enough. But I was like,
Yep, that head on a swivel.
yes,
Or like you're
oh
listening
man,
for stuff, listening for any kind of distress or problems or anything.
yeah,
Uh,
that was something else. But it was a good time, and I'm so
it was.
glad we had a chance to do it, and has led us here to this
Yeah.
as well. So let's go back in time really quick because you've been in public safety for about 6 years now. So
Mhm.
how did you get involved in public safety to begin with?
Okay, so before I did dispatch, I did 2 years of fire and EMS, and
Mhm.
I like to say it was kind of a family thing. So in high school, I worked for a t-shirt shop for this couple that went to our church, and they really took me in when I was in high school and helped me with just like growing up, learning how to be a high schooler, learning how to navigate all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And while I was working for them, the owner decided that he was going to go back and get his EMT. He had been an EMT prior, but had gotten out of it for other reasons and decided now was a good time to get recertified and go back in. So I worked at the shop through his whole class and everything. And we studied, I learned all the different stuff for EMT. And that brought me into the fire department, and I really just found my place in public safety not long after that. So he helped me get a job at my first dispatch center after I came back from Louisiana, where I started in fire.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people say that when they get in there, it's something, whether it be an incident, whether it be a call, or just even that sit along that they were in, it got into their blood right away. Can
Yep.
you do you feel like there was something specific, or
So
how did it work?
I was sitting with the supervisor. I did my first sit in 4 months after I put my application in. I really didn't think I was going to get hired because they never got back to me.
Mhm.
I didn't realize how long it takes to get hired for a dispatch job at that time. But 4 months after, I had talked to the director and everybody, and he was like, okay, we'll come do your 6 hour sit in. So I came in, I was sitting with the supervisor. It was a pretty chill day so far. And then all of a sudden, they start taking calls like crazy. Probably 50 or 60 calls. They had a 25-person brawl at Walmart in the produce section.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Just
whoa. Okay, hold on. First off, your sit along was like straight up 6 hours.
Mhm.
Okay. And then there's 25 people fighting in the produce section.
At Walmart, yeah. Yep.
What?
I can tell you exactly what Walmart it was. I can tell you it was right there by the bananas. I don't know what started it. We never found out, but they were just fighting, throwing hands right there in front of the bananas in Walmart. And
Wow.
we took so many calls on it. And I remember everybody like yelling across the room, do they need EMS? Do they need an ambulance? How far out are the police officers? Does anybody have any weapons? All the different stuff you do as dispatchers. And I was like, oh, I like this. I want to be a part of it. Look, I've got chills just talking about it.
Oh my God.
That was it. I heard that one. I was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do. I'm hooked.
Damn, that is awesome. So I wonder, maybe there was a sale on like Chiquita bananas or some shit, or like the organic ones. They're like, I wanted that last one of organic ones. That's crazy, man. Like, I've seen videos, I've seen videos where, people are fighting at Walmart, but not in the produce section, and not by the bananas.
By the bananas. We'll never forget it.
Oh man, that's amazing. I mean, that's the type of stuff that, when you're talking to people and they say, what kind of stuff happens when you're in 911? You throw that one out and people are just, is that real life? Like, yes, it is.
And I always forget that I have that story too.
Yeah.
Because I never think about it. Nobody ever asks you like what got you hooked in 911 before. So I think that's the first time actually I've ever told that story. So
dang. Well, I'm glad you told it, because that is pretty awesome. Holy crap. Well, and again, some of that stuff, that's the way it happens.
yeah.
You have some sort of call or something happens within dispatch or whichever, and you just know you're in the spot that you want to be in. So, for me as well, when I very, very first started dispatching, I thought that I didn't get the job either until the chief showed up and was like, hey, you want the job? And I was like, oh, I didn't think I got it. And he's like, well, the background check takes forever, and it had been 2 months. So yeah. I thought, fuck, I don't think I made it. But excuse me. But then everything went from there. So you end up, getting the job and everything. You go through the sit along, you go through all of these other things, and then you start training. But even before that, when you first walked into dispatch, what was that like? Because for me, it was overwhelming a bit.
Yeah. My first experience in a dispatch was a little weird. Because I had the fire and the EMS background to it. I had more of an understanding than the general public of like what they did and what I was getting into. But my first center was a little chaotic, and sometimes they didn't work super great as a team. And so even just coming in, working my first couple shifts, I witnessed that very quickly. And I witnessed a work culture where everybody was just so tired and so frustrated and grumbled all the time. Man. It really, really took a toll for a little bit there. So I had to kind of adjust and figure out, okay, is this what I want to become? You talked a little bit in the intro about like eating your young and how we are so bad at that in 911. And I essentially told myself that I was not going to be that person. I was not going to get ran off. I was not going to quit. I was going to keep pushing through no matter where it took me. So it was a very interesting experience coming in for the first time.
Man, you take me back, because that's kind of how it was in the beginning not when I very first started, but when I switched to the central dispatch, the dispatch center that I finished off my career in, because it was a different mindset. I'll say that it was a different mindset for sure, where you're coming in and no one is talking to you, no one like greets you or welcomes you. I mean, there was maybe like, oh, hi, nice to meet you or whatever, but that was it. When you're training, you're with your trainer and nobody's talking to you. And it was I was kind of the same way as you, thinking, do I want to stay in this profession if this is how people are acting? Because I was told right off the bat, we're a family, we work together, and all this other shit. and then I get in there and it's none of that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to quit, because I didn't feel comfortable there. I didn't know if I could trust those around me. If you're not welcoming me in, how are we supposed to do this? How are we supposed to be this quote unquote family? And I remember telling my wife and saying, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And a friend of mine that I actually grown up with and went to school with and everything, she was working there. And I said something to her and she goes, no, 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 don't quit. She's like, don't quit. She goes, this is just the way they do it. And I said, man, someone's got to change. But
Yeah.
after me, things changed. I think I was the last one because they started changing things. And actually, my friend that I had spoken to, she ended up becoming the training coordinator, and she's the training coordinator there now.
Yeah.
And everything is different. And so I'm glad that if I was the last one that had to deal with that bullshit, that it ended up being something that others coming in, that it would be different for them,
Yeah.
because you don't want anybody to go through that.
Yeah. Absolutely not.
I'm glad that you stuck with it though. I mean,
Me
was
too.
there despite that, was there, I guess, a support system as well, or was it just you that was just saying, you know what, I'm going to do this no matter what because this is something that I want to do?
So it was a little bit of both. I had to set that resolve to begin with. And then I worked with some really great people at that center. I met one of my absolute best friends on the entire planet, the Thelma to my Louise type
Nice.
deal here, working in that center. And we both work at different places now, and we still talk every single day. So, I had her to back me up. I had our trainer. We actually got trained by the same person who I was able to reach out to and be like, hey, I'm having problems. What do I do here? That type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some people there that were just really good for my soul. Maybe we had a different outlook on things job wise, but just genuine, down to earth people that cared about me and that cared about my mental health as well, working in that position. And then I had the officers too. And the officers really were more of the ones who were like, hey, you need to stick with this. Don't get out of this job just because of what's happening type deal. I had deputies that I became really good friends with there who helped push me through to find my footing, even if it was somewhere else for a little bit. And I'm really grateful for everybody.
That's awesome. See, that right there is one of those key elements that you need to make it through, because I mean, we only have each other, and if we don't
Yeah.
have those folks there, probably end up burning out faster than anything else, or you just end up quitting. And I kind of feel like that's maybe one of the big issues with a lot of the short staffing. I mean, I know it's a deeper problem than just this, but I feel like if we could actually talk to each other and really be there for each other, people might stay.
Yeah.
Um, Again, there's a lot more to it. I know that, but I feel like that's one of the biggest things. So, going through all of this, what was the training like? Um,
So I
you're laughing already.
I went through okay. I have been in training because I've changed so many centers.
Yeah.
That's really my job now. I have been through like 7 or 8 trainers. Okay. And then I was a trainer myself. So my very first trainer, he is actually the director of that first agency now.
Oh,
And I remember he taught me how to dispatch on fire and EMS. And I am the biggest perfectionist that you will ever meet, ever in your entire life. And if somebody says they are more of a perfectionist than me, then let's go. Because I will win, hands down, 100% every single time. And I used to get so frustrated because, everybody gets tongue tied.
Mhm.
Everybody accidentally open mics. Everybody says something they don't mean to say.
Yeah.
And I would do that, or I'd set off the wrong tone or something. And I get so frustrated. And he'd start playing Taylor Swift, Shake It Off, or he'd start playing Let It Go from Frozen and be like, you just have to move on. Just move past it. It's a learning experience. It's fine.
Right.
So I went from him to a trainer on the floor, and I was her first trainee, and she and I butted heads constantly about everything all the time. It was just a fight
Oh
every
no.
single shift. Not intentionally, but that's just where it would end up being. So I ended up getting reassigned from her, and she
Mhm.
and I actually ended up being really good friends once we weren't stuck together by a training cord for 12 hours at a time. Once we
Right.
got a little bit of distance between us, we became pretty good friends. But my next trainer after that was another supervisor who did very much the same thing. It was a lot of, if you didn't kill anybody and you got the responders where they needed to be, then you were doing just fine. So a lot of working on my own insecurities and perfectionism while learning how to do this job.
Perfectionism is a hard thing, right? Because we're in a profession where you have to be almost damn near perfect, but we also have to remember, and others have to remember too, that we are also human.
Yes.
And it's a hard thing because I remember also when I was a supervisor, and someone messed something up or whatever, and I'd have to bring them to the office to talk to them. We would go over the call, right?
Hmm.
And they would tell me, what they felt went wrong or whichever. And I would just basically listen and then say to them, there's nothing more that I can say to you that will make you feel any worse than what you feel now, because you are probably beating yourself up more than anything that I could say. I mean, we're sitting in here right now and I can see it, you can feel it
Yeah.
from people when they're beating themselves up. And so we would just kind of talk through it. And if there was anything that, any tips that I had or whatever, of course I would put that out there, or we would talk about whichever else, but there was never a moment with me as a trainer, or even, supervisor talking to someone where it was like, you should have done this better, you should have done this or that, because that's going to make people feel like shit. I don't want people to feel like shit. They're feeling
Yeah.
like shit enough as it is. So let's just talk about this. Let's use our words and mean what we say.
Well, and I think being so young in a place like that as well, I started dispatching right after I turned 19.
Mhm.
Um, and I was much, much younger than anybody in my center. Most people had like 10 or 12 years on me. So not only is there that aspect of the public and the responders are expecting you to be perfect at your job as well, but when you were that young coming into a job this serious, there's a lot of proving yourself and being like, hey, I can do this and I belong here. I can handle whatever gets thrown at me, even if it takes me a second or even if there's a little bit of a learning curve. Like, just because I'm young doesn't mean that I have any less of a right to be sitting in this seat than you do. I earned my place here just like you did.
For
And
sure.
I'll never forget my first week working in there. I was working sheriff's office dispatch, and one of the detectives came in and he introduced himself to me. And he looked at me and he went, "You look a little young. How old are you?" And so I told him I was 19. And he goes, "You were really young for me to be putting my life in your hands."
Oh, shit.
Like, you want to talk about somebody? I'm already stressed enough as it is. I'm already terrified, but then you're going to tell me that on top of it.
Right. Oh,
So
man.
just
Yeah.
that, like, added little kick. But
Yeah,
that
that's
stuck with me because he's absolutely right. I had his life in my hands a lot of the times, and when we dispatch, we hold on to them.
mhm.
So I've always made it like a personal part of me to remember that the people on the other side of the radio are just as much people as I am.
Man. Now I feel for you, and I know what you mean as well, because when I first started dispatching, I was 19.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you understand entirely.
Yes, yes, yeah, and, I started in a small police department, but still just as important as these lives that are out there, and I'm the only one in there for 8 hours.
Yeah.
So I man, you just took me back. I remember that feeling of, "Oh, hey, no, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. How old are you?" 19. "Alright." I'm like, "Oh,
Yep.
what does that mean? Why are they saying that? Why that reaction?" But, I felt the same way, I had to prove myself, and I was doing everything that I could,
Mhm.
and they knew that. They understood that as well, and, there was a lot of hard stuff that we all dealt with, and we were able to come together, We were
Mhm.
able to bridge that gap and learn from each other, which is always a good thing. So, you go through all of that, and then you start out on one side and then you come into dispatching. And was it just dispatching law enforcement, or are you taking calls as well?
I was taking calls as well. So we did police, fire, EMS, and call taking. We did all of it and then just rotated positions in my first center.
So what was that like in the beginning? Because I know for me, you go through all, well, okay, hold on. Let me go back a little more. When I
Okay.
very, very first started, I simply observed my trainer take
Mhm.
one 911 call that first night, that first midnight shift that I was in, and then it was my turn. So that was nerve-wracking. But switching from the small police department in Florida back to Southwest Michigan, where I grew up in, the county that I grew up in, Central Dispatch, that was a whole different beast because now I've got more people that I'm working with. I have to figure out that dynamic. And then I'm learning all the geography, I'm learning all the codes, all the ORI stuff, like all of
Mhm.
these different things. And for those who are watching who are in the general public that don't know what I just meant by saying ORI, I don't remember what that stands for, but basically what it is, it's a number for identifying different agencies when we are sending messages for like warrant checks and stuff. So that's all that is. But and I still have mine memorized. I'm not going to say them on here, but I have mine memorized, which
I
is
love it
funny
because I
that
never memorized any of mine.
yeah.
Never. It was a button, and I could click the button, or I had to backspace.
Oh
Like
damn.
one of them, I
Good.
remember I had to backspace 3 and then do a 1 and a 0 0. But I can't tell you any of what that other number is.
Well,
None.
see, so the reason I had mine memorized too is because the system that we had, and it was at least at that time, it was a newer system, but it
Hmm.
was a drop down window. So for the longest time, they were in like almost like an alphabetical order and
Hmm.
stuff, in a sense, and I'd have to scroll. So eventually they moved the two that we would use all the time to the very top, but before that, which I was like, why didn't you guys do that from the beginning? But
Right.
before that, I had them all memorized. So, we are learning all of that stuff, and then it is time to start taking phone calls. And I am just, all right, here we go, here we go. All the training and stuff that I've had, but nothing prepares you for the calls. I mean, you can
Yeah.
have all the training in the world, but then the call comes in and some of it goes out the window. Not fully. I don't, people who are listening and watching this, don't get it twisted. I don't mean that we don't know. I just mean that you have that moment where you're like, oh shit, you're like, here we go. And you're going through all of it. And then at the end of it, after that first call, for some people, not everyone, you're like, wow, that just happened right now. So what was it like for you?
So the first one that I remember taking, it was just a high priority call right out of the gate. I was on midnights, and it was a breaking and entering in progress. And the law enforcement agency was chasing somebody. They were doing a foot chase, and the guy that they were chasing broke into these people's house, and the residents of the house called, and I took the call. And I can't remember what I said or what I told them to do or how I processed. Like, it's all just a blur in my
Yeah,
brain at this point. And honestly, I think from about 2 minutes after I took the call, it turned into a blur, and I was like, whoa, okay. But I remember listening back to it and listening back to the recording and hearing myself as terrified as the woman that was calling was. And I was like, oh my God, Hannah, you can't do that. You can't be scared. They're
yeah,
scared. You're not going to help anybody if you're scared. And so that was one of those moments too. We talked about like setting in that resolve earlier, where it just kind of clicked, where I was like, okay, whatever comes across that phone, I'm going to be ready, and I'm going to just deal with it, whatever it is, and I'm not going to be scared. And there have been moments where like I've gotten emotional on phone calls, or I feel scared for them, but you do not hear it, and it does not reflect, because at that point you're not helping anybody.
true. Right. Yeah, no, exactly. And man, uh, yeah, again, you're taking me back to, to a lot of those. And I don't think in the beginning that I remember going back and listening to some of those calls. Like if one of my trainers or something said, I want you to listen to this
Mm-hmm.
and tell me, if you think that there was anything, that you missed, or I don't know, whatever, or how you sound. There might have been once or twice in the beginning, but um I do remember sitting there and taking these high priority calls and just in the back of my head, just like, do a good job, do a good job.
Yes, absolutely. Just be like, okay, okay, okay. Just next question, next question, next question, next question.
And you just keep going and you just keep
Yep.
going. And, hopefully in between those, you get a moment to breathe, but sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you go from the one right to the next one, and it's a whole completely different thing. And there was one time that I took domestic calls like back to back to back to back, and even though the incident type was the same, it was just completely different, every single one of them. And I remember when I was taking them thinking, okay, something's got to give. Like one of these has to be verbal only.
Yeah.
No, they just continued to get worse and worse and worse. I'm like, "Damn, this must be my night. Is it a full moon?
I
What the
was going
hell
to
is
say,
going
it must
on?"
be a full moon.
Yes, yeah, and you know, some of those it was. There was a full moon going on. I'm like, "Damn."
Yeah.
I look at the clock, like, it's only been 10 minutes.
7:30,
Like,
we're only an hour into our shift.
right. Yeah.
What
It's
do
like,
you mean it's not even dark outside yet?
it's gotta be time to go home. Like, "No, you've only been here 20 minutes." Like, "What?"
Yep.
Oh, it
And
is the
when I
craziest thing.
first started, I started about the time that like the riots and everything were starting as well. So
Oh,
that created an entirely new layer to an already difficult training experience. But
right.
we worked out of the basement of a courthouse. And there was a monument in front of our courthouse that was the center, like the point where all of the riots met and everything. And so we'd have other agencies coming into our jurisdiction we had to learn to work with. We were sending our guys out to other people. We had people trying to get into our basement at one point because they didn't realize that like we were down there and what we were, or that we were a separate division from the sheriff's office and stuff like that. And those are the nights that I think of when it was just call after call after call after call after call, and you don't have room to really breathe or take a break. We would take turns running in and out of the room to go get water, go heat up food, go to the bathroom. Somebody had to go smoke. You wouldn't even go outside. You stepped into the hallway. It was,
Oh.
yeah.
So, okay, hold on a minute. So you mean like protesters were trying to get into the basement there?
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my God. And I can't imagine sitting there and, whatever windows that are there that you can see the people and you see
None.
them getting in, like,
No windows. We could
oh,
hear them.
oh,
We
that's
we
even
had
more
like
freaky, man.
a fire door, and you could hear them hitting and pulling on the fire door and trying to get in through the door.
Jeez. I mean,
Yeah. It
that's
was
the equivalent
terrifying.
of taking a high priority 911 call because you can't see it, but you can hear it, and then you start putting it together in your head and you're like, "Oh man, this is horrible." But now you're down there and you can't see it, but you can hear it.
Yep. And then it's like,
Oh,
what are you gonna do? Who are you gonna send? Because everybody's tied up dealing with the people just in town itself, not even the
mhm.
ones trying to get in down here. So I think we ended up actually having the fire department come over and they set up in the area for us and just kind of put big bright red lights and a big truck right there, and that helped.
Jeez.
But
Okay,
it was,
so, um, how was it when you left then? Like, did you guys have to get escorted out or
yes,
anything like that?
we had to be escorted in and we had to be escorted out by the sheriff's office. So our cars were parked. If the courthouse is like here,
Mhm.
then there's a little road in the middle, and then where we worked is right here.
Yeah.
And so we had to have escorts to get into the lot at the sheriff's office to be able to park. And they would watch us walk across the street, cross the road, cut through the alley to get into the basement. And then when we would leave, they'd sit and they'd watch us cross back over the street and get into our cars to leave. And our shift change was about the same time that their patrol meetings let out for day
Yeah.
shift. Like they'd come in and do their little, we're going to have a great day. This is what's going on type of meeting. And when they were leaving, we'd go through shift change. So a lot of the time, the day shift would stay over and just make sure everybody got to their cars, make sure everybody got out of the parking lot safe and everything.
Man, I would have been like, "Your ass isn't gonna sit over there and watch. You're gonna
Yeah.
walk with me."
Yeah. They had like a town curfew put in place, and we had to have our badges with us all the time because going to and from work broke curfew. And so we had to be able, if we got stopped by like the highway patrol or somebody, we had to be able to show our badge and be like, yeah, no, we're coming to and from work. We're supposed to be out right now, type thing. It was, yeah.
Oh my
Those were a
god.
rough couple months.
Damn. Yeah, I can only imagine, but only because, you're telling me.
Yeah.
Like, That is pretty crazy. So I can imagine, you've got high stress, right, already to begin with, right off the bat, because you're answering 911 calls. But you've also got these protests that are going on. And I can only imagine, like, driving there. Like, for me, I would have to play some kind of, I don't know, soft music or something to get myself
Yeah.
calm.
I drove back and forth in silence
Oh,
because I
man.
was so overwhelmed with the noise
Yeah.
by that point, especially leaving work, that I didn't want to hear anything.
Oh,
Even the turn signal on my car was too loud.
damn. See, and that's another thing too, so there have been times where I've been around, folks that have been, in dispatch or currently in dispatch or presently rather, but I've also experienced it myself where I'm in a room or at an event or whatever, and it's super loud in there, and I'm thinking, "Why is this bothering me?" And then I remember, oh, it's because of it takes me back to some of those nights where things were going to hell,
Yep.
and all I wanted was some sort of silence. And just like you know, I would drive home. I worked 45 minutes from the center that I worked at, and or the house that I lived at. So it was a 45-minute drive, and I would sometimes drive with nothing on, but also it would suck though because I would be repeating some of those calls in my head and thinking, "Huh, okay, hopefully that person's all right, but also did I do everything I could have done?
Yeah.
Did I ask could I have asked anything else? Is there anything else?" And then I'm just like in my head, and then before I know it, I'm about 5 minutes away from home and I'm thinking, "How did I get this far?"
Yep. And you don't even remember the drive. So the first agency I worked at, I lived 3 minutes down the road. I lived right in
Mhm.
town. The second agency I worked for was a 45-minute drive. And then the third agency I worked for in North Carolina, from the time I got hired until we moved into that town, which was about probably 4 or 5 months, I had an
Mhm.
hour and a half drive.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah. Especially after working 12s.
Right,
It
yes,
was,
yeah, that's, it's I mean, it would be long, even going in for an 8-hour or like a 4-hour over or 2-hour overtime shift, whichever, but, yeah, to work 12, and if there's OT on top of that and you're driving home, man, that'd be way worse for many, many reasons, but for me specifically, it would be, "Damn, you better stay awake." Like
my husband would call me, and he did that on our 40, like when I had that 45-minute commute too,
Mhm,
because when we first started dating, I worked overnights, so I worked 6 to 6, and he worked 6 to 6 during the daytime. So when I'd be leaving work, he'd be when I'd be on my way home, he'd be on his way to work, and so we'd use that 45 minutes and talk, and that was really the only time we saw each other on the days that I worked or got
yeah.
to talk to each other. And then when I started working for the last county I worked at before DOD, and I had that hour and a half commute, he sat on the phone with me and kept me awake every morning when I drove home.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a good support system right there. That is very
Yeah,
cool.
he's great.
Um, so before we transition into what it
Mhm.
is that you're doing now, what about a call? And of course, only if you feel comfortable. But what about a call that kind of sticks with you?
So there's always several, and you
Mhm.
always hear one and you think, okay, this is the worst thing I'm going to hear. And then it somehow always gets topped. And I don't understand that. And that's the one thing about our jobs that I hate, is because you always think this is it. This is the worst. And then it somehow progressively gets worse.
Yeah.
Um, and I think one of the ones more recently that has stuck with me was we had a 2-year-old get killed in a car accident. And I didn't take the phone call for it, but my we didn't know if she was in the car or not. And I was working the fire channel. I was working fire and EMS. So I was on the other side of the radio with them when he rolled that car and had her in the car, and she got killed. And they couldn't find her. And he was not being honest about whether or not she was in the car. So we didn't know where she was. The fire department had some sense of that she might be underneath the vehicle, but they didn't know for sure. So I worked the radio with them. And our sheriff was actually a volunteer on that department. So he was on my fire department radio. as well. And highway patrol who handles wrecks out in that jurisdiction, the highway patrolman was also a volunteer on that fire department, so I had him on my radio as well. And I just remember hearing his voice crack and hearing him break when they got that car up and they found her. And I knew before he even said it, I knew. And it just broke me a little bit.
Oh, damn. It's, for those people that are out there, out in the field, we work with a lot of them. We get used to their voices.
Yeah.
They get used to our voices, and we can tell with each other, like you were saying, his voice, kind of cracked or braked or whichever, broke rather, and you can tell, when something is wrong. There was a few officers that I worked with that were just real hard asses, and their voice was always even, and you knew that if there was a change in their voice, it was something bad.
Yeah.
And to have to hear that and then go through everything, just like you kind of break a little bit. Did you have that support? Like, was there like a debriefing or anything that went along with
So
that?
we didn't have a debriefing, but I did have a really good support system with my shift. So the way that our room was set up is law enforcement, the 4 consoles were on one side and they made a little box. And then there's a big piece of like where the consoles backed up against each other, and then there's a piece of glass in between. And on the other side of that glass was fire, EMS, supervisor, and call taker. Well, on nights, typically we only staff the fire and EMS position. And if you're short staffed, you have one person working both channels. So I was sitting over there by myself, and my supervisor came over and she talked to me a little bit about it and everything. And then our shift like progressively just moved over to my side of the room, and we actually set up a table and we just did a puzzle, and we just sat and did a puzzle while once everything calmed down and the calls weren't coming in back to back to back to back to back, and we could afford for some of us to be away from our consoles for a little bit. That was our, like, there wasn't conversation to it. We just sat there and did our puzzle, but just having that silent support system helped so much, because I've listened to bad incidents. I've listened to shitty calls and worked shitty incidents on the radio and felt like that breaking before, but I had never really had that sense of community to be able to help put those pieces back together like that. Not directly in the center on the floor with me like I did here.
Wow. I can definitely agree with that silent support. It's a funny thing, we talk about talking to each other and doing all of this stuff, and how I was saying in the beginning, if we could just talk to each other, maybe people would stay. That's a completely different situation, right? So with stuff like this, um, that silence can be good because you've got those folks there with you. They're feeling the exact same thing, and it's without saying a word, you're being there for each other. It's almost like an embrace, just being there, together. You're going through it together. And I say that too because I had a good friend of mine, a sergeant, who passed away, and it was out of nowhere. Just out of nowhere, some shit happened, and it wasn't duty death or anything like that. It was just something that happened. And I went into work that next morning, and I talked to one of the supervisors, and I said, "How did the night go?" And he goes, "Are you kidding me?" And I said, "No. What do you mean?" And he goes, "Nobody called you?" And I said, "No, no one called me. What's going on?" And then he told me that that sergeant had passed, and I just stood there and I said, "Don't fuck with me." I said, that's not cool, man. Don't play around like that." And he goes, "No, man, I'm not playing." He's like, "They were supposed to call you." So then, you're stuck there, and I had my team coming in and I didn't know who knew, so I'm telling them what's going on. And we had someone come in the following day, and it was a person who was from dispatch as well, and it was kind of like that silent support. He just kind of walked around, kind of observed us, what we were doing, excuse me, and then he spoke and said, you guys are working like a well-oiled machine right now. I'm here for you if you need me. I come from where you come from, but your work and everything that you're doing is helping you get through this. You've got the support. So that was really the only thing he said, and he was just there with us for a little bit, and then he left. And just that little bit was kind of what we needed.
Yeah.
Man, I'm glad that you had that support there, no matter how it was, doing the puzzle, whichever. It's good to have that, because there's some places that don't. There's some places who are just like, okay, well, let's continue on, let's move forward. And you're like, yeah, I would love to move forward, but I would also like to talk to somebody, or just know that someone is there, even like you were saying with that silent
Yeah.
support, just to know that somebody is there who understands and cares. Because then that's when people start getting jaded. That's when people start feeling like nobody cares, I'm out.
Yeah. Well, and this center in particular, I've worked at a lot of different centers, I've worked a lot of different shifts and with a lot of different people, and this center has some of the strongest dispatchers that I know and that I have ever had the pleasure or the privilege to work with. And they were always good about that. I mean, from the admin down, if something happened, somebody was reaching out. If you took a bad call, even if it doesn't seem like a bad call to anybody else, if it impacted you and they could tell that it impacted you, somebody was reaching out, whether it was your assistant supervisor, whether it was your supervisor, whether it was the QA manager or the director, somebody was going to check in on you, make sure if you were okay, and then let you know that if you're not, that's fine. And they were going to give you the resources and the support to be able to work through that.
That's awesome. Gotta love that. So you've made a transition recently.
Yes.
And I want to talk about that here for this last portion of this episode, because what you're doing sounds very interesting. And your boss, she had mentioned it to me back in, I don't know, January or December or something like that. And I said, really? And she goes, yeah, I'm putting this thing together, and we'll see how it goes. I was like, well, good, best of luck. Let's see how it goes. And then things started to ramp up and stuff. And then you had mentioned that you were going to be doing it as well. So please tell me what DOD is, or Dispatchers on Demand.
Yeah, so DOD stands for, like you said, Dispatchers on Demand. What we are a group of dispatchers and call takers with center experience who go into centers with low staffing, centers that are having a hard time hiring and keeping people, are like forcing OT, that type of thing. And we come in and fill the seats so that they can get just a little bit of a break. They don't have to work that extra 4 shift or come in for that extra 2 or 4 hours. Or even if they do have to come in, there's not such a strain on them. We help alleviate some of that pressure.
That's
so
cool.
I have been with Moetivations and the DoD program since the beginning of April. And I currently work in a center in New England, and I absolutely love it. My whole thing is getting to take care of dispatchers and taking care of those who take care of others. So when I had the opportunity to do this, even though it meant leaving my home agency that I absolutely love and adore, I couldn't not go this way, not move into this new position, because it really just speaks to my heart and to what I'm passionate about, in a sense, in a step more than just dispatch.
Right. What was one of the things that sold you on it?
Well, there were
There's
a lot of
lot,
pieces.
right? There's a lot of things. Yeah.
Really, it just all kind of fell into place because I had no intention of leaving the agency that I was at. Like, I loved it, absolutely loved it, and I wanted to be admin staff there someday. Like, that was it. That's where I was going to retire from. And my husband ended up leaving his job. And then the lease on our apartment was getting ready to run out. And I have really bad anxiety and a couple other like mental health things. And so we were like 4.5, 5 hours away from my parents, and we didn't really have any network or any kind of support system outside of the two of us where we were. and it was just taking its toll on me and on my mental health. And so we knew we wanted to come back out this way, back out west, and be closer to my parents. And I had to leave my agency to be able to do that. I thought I was just going to work for another county, but I didn't really want to go through like the whole county process again. And I was a lead at my last agency. I was a trainer and had applied for like assistant supervisor before and ended up pulling out of it because of this. I figured this was coming. So I didn't want to start at the very bottom again. And when I heard about the DoD program and then being able to not have to start at the bottom, being able to come in and help people on top of it, really just kind of sold it for me. I was like, yeah, absolutely, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to help take care of those who take care of others.
Oh man,
So
when
now I'll
uh,
get you.
when we were at the Florida APCO conference about a month ago, I sat in one of your sessions and I was sitting right up front, and you did amazing as always. And you
Thank you.
mentioned what you do, and there were so many people in there who were
Yeah,
raising their hands. They were like, "What? Wait, what? What is this? What is this?" And then someone who was sitting up front had said, kind of like traveling nurses. They were like, "That's awesome."
exactly.
Yeah. And so everybody was asking so many questions, and we're thinking, man, there are a few that I heard that were saying, I want to reach out to be involved in this. And there were others that I remember hearing saying, I want to reach out to be involved, but in the sense that having y'all come out there to help them with some of their short staffing things.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, we've got a pretty good sized team now. And we're in several different states. Like I said, we're in New England, we're in the Midwest, we're in the Deep South. We are all over the place and just continuing to grow. And it makes for like really great stories. Like one of my favorite things that I love about it is I've never been to New England before. I'm born and raised North Carolina,
uh
spent a very small amount of time in Louisiana, but otherwise I've never been up north. And if you drop a girl from the South in New England, it creates a whole lot of confusion for people that call 911 and people that call the police department because they don't ever think they've got the right place. And
oh,
they're like, "Do I have 911 for city and state?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Or they'll hang up on the 911 line and then call back on the non-emergency line and be like, "Well, I called 911, but I don't think I got the right place because some lady with a southern accent," and that's a true story. Some lady with a southern accent answered the phone. So I just want to make sure you know what's going on. And I was the same one that answered her phone call both times. Like,
that
yes,
is that's
yes, ma'am.
hilarious.
So it's a trip. Or like they're teaching me to talk with a New England accent. And the problem is that a New England accent doesn't have many R's in it. They drop their R's. Well, in the South, we drop our D's. So then I have no R's or no D's because I just kind of put it together. And my words just sound like a jumbled mess. It's so silly.
So, if you were to say the word dribble, it would just
Nope.
be ibble.
Yep, probably.
You go out and ibble the basketball. Oh, that's interesting. I see, and I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
didn't know that, with accents and stuff like that, that certain words are dropped. And it's like and I don't know if this happens all the time, but whenever I've heard someone speak with an Australian accent
Mhm.
and there's an A at the end, it always sounds like there's an R that's added. Like when they say Australia, it's Australia. And I don't know if it's
Never
all the
noticed
time.
that before. I'm sitting here like going through my head, like Finding Nemo specifically, because when I think of Australia, I think of Finding Nemo.
Oh, there you
And
go.
not that anybody in Finding Nemo uses an Australian accent, but that's
I've
wild.
yeah, I've heard it a few times, and maybe it's
Yeah.
just the person, I don't know, maybe it's, a different area of Australia, I don't know, but I've heard it a few times and I've thought, "Oh, that's okay." But I mean, it kinda goes along with what you're saying, you drop
Yeah.
the D and, then R
And then
and
there's that whole other piece of like I guess they're euphemisms that we
Mhm.
use in the South that they don't use up north. So I had a very, very intoxicated person call the other day,
Yeah.
and I processed the call and everything, but I turned around to the dispatcher and I was like, "They're three sheets in the wind." And the dispatcher just kind of looked at me like, "What? They're what?" I was like, "They're drunk. They're very, very drunk." Or bless your heart. That's the funniest thing to me when people from New England pick up on the context of a bless your heart. they're just like, oh, hey, I know what that means. I know what you're saying. And I'm like, you know what? I'm glad you do. I'm glad you do. It's so
Oh man.
funny.
That is interesting. I didn't think about, the different dynamics of that, just speech in general,
Yeah.
and different sayings and all that good stuff. And man,
Now,
that makes for a funny shift though.
it really does. It keeps things like really light and pretty amusing, which Lord knows we need in
Yeah.
911. And I've really just grown to love like my little corner of New England. I look forward to getting to go. I look forward to getting to work with the people. I work with some really great people up there and just embracing this culture that's so different than what I'm used to down here. So it's
So
really enjoyable.
how does that work then? So do you stick to one section for like a month or like 3 weeks, or how does that work? But also at the same time, when you switch, or if you switch,
Mhm.
how does that work with the training? Like, how does all of that
Yeah.
stuff work?
So assignments, like the admin staff at Motivations, Mo and Austin and Christy and Jody and everybody and Angela will look at all of your certifications and everything and see when you fill out. Okay, let me back up. Let me just back all the way up a little bit
Okay.
here. So when you start at DoD, you fill out this onboarding paperwork here.
Mhm.
And with the onboarding paperwork, you have to tell them, I have experience with these radios. I have experience with this phone system. I have experience with EPD, EMD, EFD, APCO, questioning, whatever it is. And you essentially plug everything that you know how to do in 911 onto this form. And then our admin staff look at it and they look at what agencies want, because agencies can say, okay, we only want people with this kind of CAD experience, or we want people that are certified through the academy. And they look at your stuff and they figure out what agency you match best with. And
Oh,
they assign
okay.
you that way. And sometimes you're out there for the duration of the contract, and sometimes you get moved somewhere else where people need you. So for me, I've only done New England so far. I've only done the one center in New England, but I like it enough that it's my primary center and I don't really want to go anywhere else right now. One of the girls that I travel with in New England has also been to like North Dakota area, or we've got some girls that can do New England but are currently working in like the Colorado area because that's where their certifications fit best.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. That that works. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so as you were saying how seeing what matches up in my head, all that was playing in my head while I was listening to you was matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match, find me a find,
Me
catch
when
me a catch.
I, okay. It's matchmaking for 911.
Yes. But it's so cool, man, because then, you get to fill those needs, those specific needs. It's and of course, I'm sure if there's a place that's just like, I want all of the above, then you send a person who has all of the above or
Yeah,
whatever. But you're going through and matching it up that way, and I love that. That is really cool. So you get to go out there, and you've also got all these other stories that are going on that end up coming in, that are part of your career, they're part of your story, but then you're meeting all of these people as well.
yeah,
And you're also giving back. As you said, you're helping these centers get some sort of relief from the short staffing that's been going on for years.
yeah. And it's great because we come in with the mindset of we don't want to be permanent. We don't want to be a
Mhm.
fixture in your center. We want to be the interim. And so Mo helps with like staffing and retention, with
Mhm.
culture changes, all of that kind of stuff. She comes in and helps with that too, with the end goal of we're going to be here and then we're going to leave when you don't need us anymore. And we want to help you get to where you don't need us anymore.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's good. That's a good thing. I love that. And for those who are there's a lot of people out there who are just, people are afraid of the unknown. So if
Yeah.
there was anything that you could tell those who are listening to what it is that you're talking about in this program and all of this, what are some of those top things that you would want them to know? Because I'm sure there's, like I was saying at the Florida conference, tons of people were interested in a
Yeah.
lot of things that they didn't know. So if you were to give, like, your top 3 or top 5 or whatever of what you would want people to know from listening to this episode about Dispatchers on Demand, what would that be?
Yeah. So it's hard, for one. Don't go into it thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm going to travel, I'm going to get to see all these great places, and I'm going to get to be a tourist, and I'm going to work in these amazing centers where everybody wants me here and I'm so loved and so welcomed all the time, because it's not. It's hard. You don't leave toxic centers to go into this to get away from toxic centers. A lot of the times we're going into places that have hard cultures because
Yeah.
they need help.
Right.
And they, like, you've got burnt out people who need help, and you have to go into it understanding where I'm going. I may not be welcome here, but I'm here
True.
to help, and just keep pushing through, keep moving forward. And there's a lot of good. Like, I say that, but it's not one of those things where they're just like, oh my gosh, we don't want you here outright. But people are working long shifts and they're burnt out and they're tired. So you have to go into it understanding that that's what you're getting into, for one. And you have to have a heart for helping dispatchers that are in that position get out of those positions. Motivations does really good about taking care of their employees, of they call them partners, our Dispatchers on Demand.
Mm-hmm.
We have to fill out forms like before and after shift that talk about if we need any kind of support system as well, whether it's something going on with an agency, if it's a bad call that you took, and they actually look at the forms and everything, and they check in on you if you need it. And everybody is super accessible, which is really nice too. So if something happens, you're not just stuck in like the middle of nowhere all by yourself. You have to be resourceful to an extent. Sometimes people are telling you to climb through windows when your door's locked, when you're locked out of your house. But they're not.
Oh, that's great.
DOD is not going to leave you stranded or anything like that. So it's a
That's
really
awesome.
good experience. I really enjoy it. If you have a heart for taking care of dispatchers, you want to travel, you want to do something new, I definitely recommend looking into it. It's a really, really rewarding change.
That is excellent. How can people find out more about what it is that you do, whether it be a website, social media for Dispatchers on Demand, or even you, if they've got questions that they would like to ask you?
Yeah, so I am on Facebook. You can find me on there, or we have a Motivations Facebook page that's got our information on it, and we have a website as well, the Motivations website, and that's Moetivations, not Mo.
Sounds good. Awesome. So I have one last question for you as we go into the wrap up of this episode, and that is, if you could go back in time with the knowledge that you have now to talk to yourself at 19 in the beginning, what advice would you give yourself?
You were made to do hard things.
I like it.
Can I keep going?
Straightforward.
I'm gonna cry. So I think about everything that I have been through from 19 to now, and everything in my career, and every bad call, and every center change, and everything that I felt like I'm not going to come out the other side of this. And I would look at that little girl and just, you were made to do hard things, and if you keep pushing forward, good things are going to come.
I love it. Thank you for what it is that you do and continue to do, and what this program Dispatchers on Demand is doing as well. But just you as an individual, like I said, you are fucking amazing, and I am so glad that we had time to talk and that we were able to do this episode as well.
Yeah, me too.
And it's always a good time. So I look forward to seeing you again and talking more.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us. And that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. If you want to help support us on Patreon or on Facebook, become a subscriber of the podcast. You can do so, but an easy way to do all of what I just said, you can simply go to links.co/WTT podcast. Once again, that's links, and that's with 2 I's, links.co/WTT podcast. That goes to my bio page. It has all of my social media, ways to become subscriber on the podcast. You can listen to the latest episode, and there are just so many things there that you can check out. So please make sure to check that out. Once again, that is links.co /WTT podcast. And if you haven't done so already, pick up a copy of Imagine Listening. Your Worst Day is Our Everyday. The book is out and available now on Amazon, as well as Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, and really any place that you go to a bookstore to get books. You can find Imagine Listening. And I thank all of you for having the courage and for sharing your stories for the I Am 911 movement. This book is made up of those stories, your stories, and they're going out there, and it wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for all of you. So thank you so much for what you do each and every day as the most vital piece of public safety, and for sharing once again for the I Am 911 movement. This is book one in a series of books that are going to be coming out that highlight these powerful stories that are all yours. So thank you, all of you, for everything, and for also being there for me, but also for your trust in me to share your stories. It means more than you know. It's an honor, and I don't take it lightly. I'm humbled, just all of it. Thank you for the support throughout all of this time. And by the time this one comes out, I will have already put out episode 500, and milestone as well. Episode 500 surpassed 2 million downloads and heard in over 60 countries. Damn it. So good. Thank you all. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as LinkedIn and Twitter. And then for the audio portion of this, you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.